Ready, Magic?
كل اللي على بالك يوصلك لبابك أسرع شيء من هنجر ستيشن. اطلب الحين.
Two minutes till the premiere. So we got this debut stream going on. They're going to give us a lot of information, and I just want to tell you, I will be talking over it. This is available on Twitch and on YouTube. If you want to go watch it without me talking over it, go watch it without me talking over it. You can find the exact video link. But if you want to hang out and kind of discuss some stuff, that's what we're going to be doing here. Joe Simon, I do assume, yeah, Jace is completed. Is Jake completed? I glanced at it and said, is Jace completed? Jake is completed. It is Annie's birthday today. Everybody say happy birthday, Annie. So Jake is taking the day off to be with Annie. So you must deal with me, the Praetor.
The perfection of Elish Norn has to be inherited and shared by everyone.
There is no doubt in her mind that her way is the right way.
It is a great honor if you are completed and become a full Phyrexian. You either build the glory or become it, but you will be a part of Phyrexia.
Hello, Magic fans, and welcome to the debut of Phyrexia, All Will Be One. I'm Lady Danger from the Command Zone podcast, here to help prepare you for the greatest threat the Magic multiverse has ever faced, the insidious biomechanical empire of New Phyrexia. In this set, our Planeswalker heroes are taking the fight right to the Phyrexians. So let's see what's in store for them once they arrive.
Finally, you get to see Phyrexia in all its glory, as Phyrexians themselves, and Elish Norn specifically ambitioned it. There is an element of inscrutability and mystery in Phyrexia. I want people to feel a little bit like outsiders, but very curious. It's a fascinating world. That fascination comes through in the art. This gives you a pause, right? You don't know what might attack you. So for this set, we're reprinting a popular cycle of dual lands. With Phyrexia, we really get to dive into the dark surrealism, and we had to reimagine and visualize how they could be happening here in Phyrexia. We had to create new environments that would express not just the gameplay, but also this conflict between factions and how each faction carries out its influence with Necrogen, with Ichor, with Molten Metal. So we get to see these elements across the lands. The Glorious Facade is an extra layer that was built on top of the Old Mirrodin. Phyrexians have scrapped a lot of the metal in Old Mirrodin, and they have created an entire new sphere where they have built tons of monuments to glorify themselves. It's their vision for the rest of the multiverse. And the Twilights in particular are monuments to each of the Praetors. It was our way to have more Praetor presence in the set. Each of the Praetors is engaging the suns of different color manas. Shieldred's Black Sun's Twilight comes at a point where the Black Sun comes too close to the surface, and it looks very large. But as large as it looks, Shieldred rises above it, because Shieldred is all about imposing herself. Jin-Gitaxias is grabbing the blue sun. Jin-Gitaxias is the one who wants to study everything and exploit it for his own purposes. So his monument is doing exactly that. At a certain point in the day, the blue sun aligns with the monument to Jin-Gitaxias in a way that it seems like he's studying it. Urabrask is reaching for the red sun in his monument. We gave him a redesign in this set to make him look more combat ready, more aggressive, and streamlined too. Urabrask, however, emphasizes individuality and uniqueness. So he never quite grabs the sun. He's the only Phyrexian who lets everyone be themselves. Vorinclex is one of my favorite Phyrexians. The monument is Vorinclex just devouring the sun. The sun comes and aligns with Vorinclex's monument in a way that it just goes into his maw. It's this Darwinian disposition to vanquish the weak. The White Sun's Twilight, the monument to Elesh Norn, opening her hands to receive the White Sun, the mana. You see a lot of like little skitterlings coming out of the monument, a bunch of Phyrexian mites. In the card, it's the mana that you use to empower yourself. You create a number of mites equal to the number of mana that you paid, and you gain an amount of life. You get incredible rewards for this. You can destroy all creatures depending on how much mana you have. And so the monument expresses that incredible power that Elesh Norn is attaining and will attain. The Fair Basilica's shapes are pointing at the center, and we created actually a hallway going into the Basilica. That's impressive, like any ancient Roman monument would be. You see a row of not cypress trees, but they're sinew trees. They have this shape, right? It's the flesh of all who have been taken. You see some ossified Phyrexians in the front of the building, raising their arms to the glory of Elesh Norn. Elesh Norn, Mother of Machines, is one of my favorite arts. All of these aspirants just dedicated themselves so much to Elesh Norn that they've decided to just become ossified and placed in her throne where she sits and she raises her arm. It's not just a gesture of glory and power, but also reaching for the multiverse. Atraxa is what everyone wants to be here, an ultimate completed Phyrexian in a high position, close to Elesh Norn. The art was made by Marta Nael. Such a great palette. It just gives it this surrealistic touch of otherworldly divinity. Atraxa's raising her arms. She's coming in with other angels. And the aspirants, who are humans who want to be fully completed. When we were working on Koth, we were trying to think, how can we depict a very strong planeswalker? This is a very passionate resistance fighter. He's beheaded a Phyrexian. There's other Phyrexians drowning in the molten metal that Koth is manipulating. His pose is that of confidence. Kaito represents this resistance element against Phyrexia. So you see these looming suns and you see these looming monuments, and Oil is shooting at Kaito, but Kaito is slashing through it, taking it apart. His presence and his action are literally tearing through the composition. The Eternal Wonder is cutting through a Phyrexian, but also cutting through the layer itself. This is a beautiful piece by Alex. It's made in oils. It's just a traditional painting. The Wanderer finds herself in the middle of the Hunter's Maze, and she makes quick work of it. I love the smile of confidence that she has. This is easy work to destroy a Phyrexian for her. You will definitely travel to an alien world here. Nothing is meant for regular human eyes to appreciate. You need to become completed a little bit.
In this set, the Phyrexians have the home field advantage. So what better time than now to celebrate Magic's most iconic villains with their very own special art treatment? Let's check in with the Booster Fund team for a closer look at the Phyrexians in all their slick, spine-chilling glory.
For one, worked with the team to develop all the Booster Fun and showcase treatments. We did a couple of full art basic lands.
Very kind of like traditional art in the most glorious way.
And we went slightly different direction with the set here, where we hired Mark Riddick, who's a pretty famous death metal artist, which fit the aesthetic of the Phyrexians. He worked in the mana symbols into his designs with some Phyrexian writing in them as well. It turned out really gorgeous.
The thing that we end up telling artists, I think, the most is don't make a Magic card. The artist has such a strong style and aesthetic that it's almost going to that artist is like, we want your version of these. On the story building and the world side, we have this substance, this glistening oil, this ichor that the Phyrexians use to spread their contagion that's just within their entire existence. And then there's this art style of ink wash painting, which ink wash art style is so expressive and it's so bold and simple, and it's about the essence of something and not about making a picture perfect image. It's about more the feeling of what you're trying to capture. We ask the artist to really focus on certain details really carefully. So part of the composition is these big giant splashes that are like brutal and violent. And then there are very deliberate areas both with the negative and the black space to like show a face, to show a claw, to show like a moment of something being ripped apart.
There's so much detail too. There isn't a foreground and a background. Your eye just keeps moving around all of his artwork.
When the main set art is so detailed and has like almost these Renaissance art roots to it and delves into that representation of body horror in such a like realistic fashion, then it gives us the chance to like pull way far away from that and get way more like expressive and figurative about it. And then what we end up with is like this set of these like very abstracty, splashy things, and then this set of like this incredible detail, and then both styles just, because of their contrast, heighten each other's beauty and efficacy. So Uzuri is a Phyrexianized elf, talking about like things that are elvish are usually like green tones and lighter colors and like softer. So even just taking it into the monochrome and having these big slashes of black within the art goes a really long way to giving that emotional feeling of horror and like brutality as opposed to like soft nature. The artist that worked on that has done a bunch of really beautiful ink wash art for us, and their style's a little bit softer, but it still functioned as a really strong piece of the set.
For Geth, we worked with Flavio Giron.
We focused in a little bit more on the face, I think, to get at that more natural element a little bit. Then there's the allowance for a lot of like brutality in the facial expression.
One of the coolest cards that we have, though, is the Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. I worked closely with Kokodo, a Japanese art agency, to develop a list of really interesting horror manga artists. Junji Ito is one of the most popular, well-known manga artists in the world, and certainly in the horror manga category. So it was great to have his work in this set.
One of the really interesting things about bringing this manga series also into the card set is that traditionally is also in black and white. So we have already this monochrome ink wash style, and then we have another whole genre of art that is traditionally also monochrome, but the style is actually very different, even though both have this psychological horror and unsettling quiet to them.
We focused in on the characters, minimal background, but we made sure that they were, doing the things that Phyrexians do well. Lots of aggression, lots of violence.
Whereas the Ichor style, the movement is in the brushstrokes. You're seeing the movement of the artist as opposed to maybe as much of like the really well executed and like visually described that's in the manga style. Also, these cards will be featured in our Step and Complete style, which is maybe more of a contrasting inspiration we had for this, where we thought about really old-fashioned brands and fashion houses because they had that same kind of like monolithic like power and vision, and that to us kind of like tapped into this Phyrexianization idea of this group of beings who want to like make everything in their own image. So that led us to this idea of this repeating pattern of the Phyrexian logo and symbol.
We also have a really cool treatment coming out in a separate bundle product called the Complete Edition. This product has all new art. We did in a black on black style for this oil slick raised foil print treatment. To get to this spot, we had to commission the art in black and white. We needed to make sure that we had some movement as well, some texture.
We were able to produce what is a very simple idea into a beautiful, elegant, incredibly arresting Magic card that if someone lays that across the table from you, that is a showstopper. Like, the room is gonna shut down and people are gonna be like, what is that?
We also have Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, fully translated into Phyrexian.
Working on this has been so much fun because what isn't better than like evil elegance?
My favorite part is the manga cards, for sure. Junji Ito, of course.
For me, I am so psyched about those oil slick cards getting out into the world because they are some of the coolest things I've ever seen. To make something that cool, whew.
They are all so cool. I will be collecting all of them.
So the cards look scary, but what makes them feel scary once you've shuffled up for a match? For more on that, let's hear from editor Matt Tabak for an All Will Be One mechanics breakdown.
And to kick things off for Phyrexia All Will Be One, what better mechanic to look at than Toxic? Toxic is a new ability found on Phyrexian creatures. If a creature with Toxic deals combat damage to a player, that player also gets some poison counters, specifically this number, the Toxic value. Paladin of Predation has Toxic 6, so if it hits your opponent, they get 6 poison counters. Why is this bad for them? A player with 10 or more poison counters loses the game. But that's not all. Bad things start happening with even a few poison counters, particularly 3. And remember that combat damage is still dealt, and Paladin of Predation smashing for 6 is probably also not fun for them. But Toxic has no effect if the creature deals combat damage to a creature or a planeswalker. A creature's power and its Toxic value aren't necessarily connected. Even if Paladin of Predation had only dealt 1 combat damage to a player, the player it dealt damage to would still get 6 poison counters. So Toxic and combat abilities like Trample get very interesting. With Toxic, it's all about poisoning your opponent. 10 is great, that ends the game, but there are other benefits too. Even if you can get them to 3 poison counters, you're going to turn on abilities called Corrupted. Corrupted abilities are all about an opponent having 3 or more poison counters. There are all kinds of corrupted abilities. The last ability of the Seed Core is an activated ability that requires a corrupted opponent to be activated, while Skrelv's Hive has a static ability that requires a corrupted ability to, well, do anything. There are instants and sorceries that get better if there's an opponent with 3 or more poison counters, and more. In multiplayer games, you only need one of your opponents to have 3 or more poison counters, not all of them. But all of them is better if you can manage that. Corrupted abilities are powerful, but don't forget the end game with most poison strategies. A player with 10 or more poison counters loses the game. Phyrexia is a machine, and that machine needs fuel. And in this set, that fuel is oil counters. A lot of cards in this set put oil counters either on themselves or on other permanents, and you're gonna find all kinds of bonuses that care about oil counters. Just like Phyrexia, you can take advantage in any way possible. More of that strange oil. Oil counters appear all over Phyrexia All Will Be One. Some cards, like Urabrask's Forge, put oil counters on themselves, and use those counters to do all kinds of stuff. In the Forge's case, that's spit hot fire in the form of Phyrexian horrors, each one bigger than the last. Oil counters don't have any inherent meaning, so look at each card to see what effects the oil counters have. Some cards care about how many permanents with oil counters on them you control. Other cards move oil counters around. Things get out of hand very, very quickly, but it's probably nothing. And to help the oil spread, we are bringing back one of the most popular mechanics Magic has ever done, Proliferate. And it's not just oil counters. Any kind of counter that you happen to be playing with, Proliferate will help you spread the love. Proliferate is a returning keyword action that's all about counters. And not those counters, those counters. To proliferate, first choose any number of players or permanents that already have counters on them. Now for each of them, and for each kind of counter it has, add another one. Your opponent has 2 poison counters, they're getting a third. Your Elesh Norn has a +1/+1 counter, make it 2. You don't have to choose every player or permanent with a counter. If your Elesh Norn had a stun counter on it, you don't have to add another one. If Norn had a +1/+1 counter and a stun counter, you'd have a choice to make. Give her 1 more of each counter, or leave the good Praetor alone. Proliferate's back, and Phyrexia All Will Be One is packed with ways to capitalize. Spread the word. It's easy to look around Phyrexia All Will Be One and think that things are kind of bleak. But there is hope. If you're looking to resist Phyrexia, there is a mechanic for you. Firmiraiden. Firmiraiden is a triggered ability found on equipment that come with their own wielder. When an equipment with Firmiraiden enters the battlefield, you create a 2/2 red rebel creature token, then attach the equipment to it. For Blade of Shared Souls, that means you can take advantage of its other ability right away, and at no additional cost. From there, it's an equipment like any other, so you can use its equip ability as a sorcery to attach it to a different creature you control. If you're ready to fight back against the Phyrexian menace and show them what a real living weapon is, Firmiraiden. Phyrexia All Will Be One brings back some old-time favorite mechanics and has a lot of new, innovative mechanics. Whether you've been playing Phyrexian decks for years or whether it's your very first time, there's something in the set for you. Make sure that your opponents and your play group and your friends, everyone you know, will be complete.
Now that we know what each side is bringing to the table, let's have a look at how the design team built tools like Corrupted and Firmiraiden for the All Will Be One commander decks.
When we start making the commander decks for the corresponding set, we're usually trying to look at that set flavorfully and mechanically and seeing what can we pick from there, what's going to be the most resonant kind of deck archetypes coming from there. For this set, Phyrexia All Will Be One, we have 1 deck based on the Phyrexians, the Corrupting Influence deck, and 1 deck based off of the Mirrans, the Rebellion Rising deck. For the Phyrexian deck, we have our commander Ixel, which is a Phyrexian angel. The main purpose of this deck is to give kind of a definition to a Phyrexian commander deck in general. Phyrexians don't have a lot of identity base in commander, and so we thought focusing on the poison aspect with the new mechanics Toxic and Corrupted would be a great direction to go with Ixel and the deck in general. When we're making a commander that wants to encompass more of the Phyrexians, we want to find a color identity that not just feels right for the Phyrexians, but has a very inclusive umbrella of other cards. So there's lots of green poison cards and white poison cards and Phyrexian cards that you can add to Ixel's deck. From the very beginning of this set, we knew we wanted to try our hand at a poison deck. Not only was it very rich for the Phyrexians, but we were just really curious to see how we could make poison work and more fun for a broader audience. Poison is traditionally a divisive mechanic in Commander, but we thought using the Corrupt mechanic would be a really good way to bring the fun of poison, which is poisoning your opponents, without bringing more of the unfun components where maybe you're defeating your opponents too fast through poison. Ixel is a little bit different. Using the Corrupt ability, you want to poison your opponents lightly as fast as you can. Once you have them poisoned, you're going to be drawing cards from their own decks, really being the villain of the story and getting a lot of card advantage through the game. So Nayali is the head of the Mirran deck and our representative from the Rebellion side. This red-white commander wants you to be more aggressive using creature tokens. The commander itself gives your attacking creature tokens double strike, which is a great way to put on their aggression and pack a big punch. This card also provides a lot of card advantage for continuously attacking with your creature tokens. Red-white usually has this weakness of having a lot of cards to play in the game, but Nayali will really help you keep it up in the later turns. The Rebel creature type actually comes from an old set of Magic the Gathering. Rebels used to have a completely different identity, and here we're actually bringing them up in a whole new context. The Firmiraiden mechanic makes these 2/2 Rebels. Those are creature tokens. Nayali loves creature tokens. Nayali's in the Rebellion. Let's make this deck about Rebels. So we have those kind of spritzes of Rebels all among the deck. The characters we put on the front of commander decks have a huge platform and a great way to display a lot of the themes of the stories and the characters we want to show off. Typically, we're working with world building to figure out who's the best fit there and what is the best thematic fit for the decks. What's really interesting about Phyrexian All Will Be One is it takes us to a completely different aesthetic world than we've ever seen before. We've seen Phyrexians here and there, and we've seen how creepy and macabre they can be, and now we have a world that is dominated by this creepy, macabre aesthetic, and it's a very different direction, and I think it's going to appeal to a lot of people who really loved what inklings we got of the Phyrexians in the past.
Switching back to the main set, Magic's play design team is responsible for taking all the different elements of a set and blending them into a cohesive gameplay experience. Let's join lead designer Andrew Brown to hear how the team brought the Phyrexians to life.
The first thing we always want to try and do is make sure that we capture the feel that we're trying to make the players feel like when they're playing the games. Phyrexia is a very popular place. You feel like you're there and you're immersed in this wild place of alien monsters and dripping claws of poison. Yeah, that's our initial goal, is just to make sure that you feel there and you're immersed within this world of, crazy Phyrexia. Who's king of the mites? That's where the idea of Skrelv was born. Skrelv is the only legendary mite creature that we have. So mites are a new token type where they are 1/1s with Toxic 1, but they can't block. It was a funny quest to make king of the smallest things. And what does that do? I guess it protects all of its subjects. Another thing we wanted to accomplish with mites was the feeling of you're being overwhelmed. Normally when we have zombie tokens, they'll enter tapped or something, but with mites, we wanted to go with something different. Since they can't block, you can't really use them to defend yourself, so it's all about growing the swarm to eventually overrun your opponents. Glissa was one of my favorite cards as a teenager. When I first opened it in a pack, I saw that it had First Strike and Death Touch. And then I asked, so what happens when someone blocks this? And they're like, oh, it automatically dies because of First Strike and Death Touch. And at the time, that was one of the most ridiculous things I'd ever heard. When we were given the task of, oh, hey, you have to redesign a new Glissa for Phyrexia, like instantly my head was like, okay, we have to put First Strike and Death Touch on this card just to keep that feel of I'm gonna defeat you in combat no matter what. And hopefully somebody down the line can have that exact feeling that I had opening it and just being like, this is ridiculous, I love this. Melira was an interesting problem because previously all of Melira's cards are anti-poison. In the story, she's one of the only people from Mirrodin to be totally immune to the Phyrexian invasion/infection. Melira is still protected from all of these evil forces, and especially the toxic and the glistening oils. She can save stuff, she stops you from being poisoned as fast. So we want to capture the feel of a character that's immune, but also willing to sacrifice herself for the greater good. Mondrak was a lot of fun to come up with because the creative department told us that we needed 5 Phyrexian gods. It's a very cool concept, but also a daunting task at the same time. Normally in Magic, we associate god creatures with some way to come back or some way to reanimate themselves, which looks awesome, but has a lot of gameplay issues because you don't want to play against the same card a bunch of the time. I was really happy with the solution we found where you pay a ton of resources and also life to eventually make them indestructible, merging the gameplay of regular gods, which is I come back, it's hard to kill me, and Phyrexians, which is like I'm going to win at any cost. I'll sacrifice any number of things just to make myself more powerful. Designing the Phyrexian Planeswalkers was a pretty big challenge. It took us a long time to vet out what does it mean to be a Phyrexian Planeswalker. We tried so many different things. We tried activating life instead of loyalty, and they're definitely more powerful because they've added this Phyrexian element to themselves, but it does come at a cost to their own power. With the completed mechanic, if you do spend that extra life to cast the Planeswalker, it's going to come in with less loyalty. A lot of previous Jace cards, would take instants and sorceries from your graveyard and let you play them again, reusing stuff, relearning stuff. This Jace is very different. All this one cares about is the quantity of cards in graveyard. All he wants to do is make someone lose their deck as fast as possible, whether it be you or your opponent. Because with the minus, you really want to get those 20 cards in your graveyard so you can really get that draw card to the bonus of draw 3 cards. I'm definitely most excited about all 5 Phyrexian Planeswalkers. Earlier in the years, we've been teasing them out with Tamiyo, now Ajani, and now we have all 5 of them released, and it's going to be really awesome to see how all the fans react. Generally, we want to make sure that people feel the entire range of emotions. So, unfortunately, Jace, you are now Phyrexian, so they'll just have to live with that.
Whether you're planning to embrace Phyrexian perfection or stand firm against the spread of corruption, we hope you've enjoyed this look into Phyrexia All Will Be One. You'll be able to join the fight at pre-releases, on Arena and Magic Online, and in stores starting February 10th. And be sure to check out Commander parties being held on March 10th. Now to close things out, we've got one last treat for you. The premiere of the official cinematic for All Will Be One. We hope you enjoy.
Pain is the sign of your imperfection. The flaw at the center of all that you are. But your suffering is at an end. We offer you freedom from flesh. Your realms are diseased, and we are the only cure. You can either kneel before this throne or become a part